Men don't even know their doctors' names. How can we expect them to handle 50-50 custody? Are funerals appropriate settings for children? I ask on this channel specifically because this is an issue that comes up a lot with split family homes, usually for single fathers who rely on the custodial mother to grant time exceptions for these things. Reason being that most split families already have some kind of custodial order in place, some every other weekend rotating holidays thing. So funerals are kind of these rare exceptions that deviate from the typical court order, and so usually one parent is reliant on the other parent to allow an exception for this time. But more and more, I am seeing these requests denied because the other parent thinks that funerals are just not appropriate places for children. Here are some examples. In this situation, dad is trying to take child to grandma's funeral. Mom says it's not appropriate. Looks like there's also a little bit of hypocrisy going on. This is one a stepmom posted. It was sent to her husband from the child's mother saying that a funeral would traumatize the child. And then in this woman's comment, it was actually the dad who refused to let the children go with her for a couple of funerals. And I guess I had never really formed a strong opinion on this before. I feel like I was a little bit too young to really understand any of the funerals I went to as a child. But my husband, who comes from an Italian family, felt a lot stronger about this. He said that if anyone prevented him from saying goodbye to his family members as a kid, that he would resent them forever. What sucks is if you do feel strongly, there's really not much you can do except for just kind of hope that all future funerals fall on your time. Because there's no temporary order you can motion with the court for a couple of days or so for a funeral. How cute would it be if the courts actually worked that fast, though? But no, you absolutely rely on the other parent. And we all know how our exes get when we have to rely on them for anything. These things tend to kind of turn into a little power struggle. But as always, what do you think? Small, young children, are funerals an appropriate place for them? Have you ever run into this issue? Or have you ever found a solution to this, like finding another separate way to grieve or say goodbye outside of a funeral? I'm super curious to hear your thoughts on this, so let's talk about it down below. Men did more work than me to bring my daughter into this world. Let me tell you about it. So I've said before that I don't think that being a child's original spawn point is a good enough reason to be considered the best or most fit parent for the child, nor that the labor we go through really matters at all in the grand scheme of that child's life. But adding on to that idea that childbirth is not this exclusively feminine experience, how would you feel if I told you that men did most of the work for my labor for me? Here's how. So first of all, my OBGYN ended up being a man. Needed one, he was available, didn't think twice about it. But apparently a lot of women would never choose a male OBGYN, and they think that they're creepy, and some people think it should be against the law. I don't care how good they are, I'm never going to a male OBGYN. The way I would never go to a male OBGYN. How are they going to tell me about my lady bits? I just don't agree with it. It should actually be against the law. Okay, but let me tell you how he knew way more about my body than me. I mean, while I was sitting there bewildered and unprepared, this man had spent 7 long years just waiting to tell me what colostrum and a mucus membrane were. Do people realize how silly it is to say your OBGYN has to be a woman to understand you? Does your kid's pediatrician have to be a child? Anyway, let's fast forward to my water breaking. My husband drives me to the hospital. We couldn't find the entrance very well, but we were in a Jeep, so he made one down a grassy mound. We made it. A couple hours passed, and the men there could tell that something was up that I couldn't. I was dilating fine, but she wasn't coming, so C-section time. Male anesthesiologist comes in for the epidural. That dude kept me laughing the whole time. If I ever have to get injected in the space between my spinal cord ever again, I hope I get that guy. He told me my pain would more reasonably go from a 9 or 10 to a 4 or 5, but that shit went to 0. We were good to go. I asked him how long the surgery would take, and he said, "You'll get to meet her in 10 minutes. Is that not the best answer? Now, quick rewind. When we first checked in, they asked who I wanted in the delivery room, and I was like, dude, I don't care. If a homeless guy off the street wants to see a live birth, let him in. So the doc goes, since you were so liberal before, we actually have a team of medical students who would love to see the surgery. Do you mind? And I'm like, bring him in. And surgeons are such funny people. The couple of guys who were cutting me open behind the curtain, my husband watched the whole thing. All of a sudden, you just hear him go, silly goose. She was playing jump rope with her umbilical cord. Let's get her out of here. I knew she was out from my husband's face. And that's how I spent 4 hours in labor and didn't do anything. The best, chillest labor of all time, 5 stars, would recommend. See, there are so many things that women are good at, like being empathetic and caring. There are just as many positive masculine qualities that contribute to birth science as well. Maybe I don't want someone who's super emotional. Maybe I want someone who's more direct and assertive. Or maybe I understand that you don't need a vagina to have a passion for childbirth and to develop the skill sets mothers and fathers rely on. But you tell me, would you hire a male OBGYN? Was my experience just a fluke? Did they just go to school for 10 years just to look at vaginas all day? Let's talk below. If you're a single father and you're not paying child support yet, get ready because you might get screwed over. Let's talk about one of the scariest pitfalls of single fatherhood, where sometimes your best intentions can lead you into one of the worst traps set by family court. Retroactive child support refers to child support for a period of time before the child support action or petition was filed. This could go based off of support guidelines at the time or whatever the court decides is fair. This is especially sought after if the mother was on any kind of welfare or support because they consider the child support reimbursement for that support. I imagine this was originally designed for moms who genuinely tried to give the father a chance, but he never showed up, so they had to force him to pay something, in which cases we're like, yay, good for her. But the way it's being used today is very different. We have women who have learned the system early, some even from their moms who learned the system before them. And now it looks like this. We get these situations where in the beginning, after the split, mom will say something like, you know what, how about you just give me like $150 a month and we can just avoid court altogether. No one wants to go to court, especially fathers, so they're pretty inclined to go along with little stuff like this, even when they're involved in taking care of the kids. Until, of course, 4 years later, dad does something to piss off the mom. Maybe he dared to move on and start dating. She goes down to the courthouse and files for retroactive child support. Now the court's calculating what it should have been. Maybe now it's like $330 a month by their standards. I've seen guys end up with bills for like $30,000, $40,000, $70,000 all at once. I'm sure my comment section will be a hell world. So of course dad's going to say, wait, I've been paying $150 a month for the past 4 years. And then the court's going to go prove it. And dad's going to be like, "Da!" So what does this mean? Should you go file child support on yourself right now? No, that's not what I'm saying. But what you do need to do is document. Document everything. ABD. Always be documenting. Screenshot and print every single email and message exchange about the money. Keep your paper trail in an organized binder. This is not advice on how to cut corners or any substitute for real legal advice, but that doesn't mean you should be treated like a deadbeat just because you don't think that the state or your ex should determine how your money is used. Everyone wants to run their mouths on dads, but if it was your ex determining how your money was used, I bet you would want to know how it's used. And why is the non-custodial parent responsible for repaying the state benefits? Why is there any correlation between child support and state assistance? I feel like it shouldn't even be offered if they didn't have the money to pay it. What about dads who need assistance? Who repays that? You know how you could avoid this whole thing? You could give custody to the parent who's not applying for benefits. But maybe that's a crazy thought. You tell me. Do you think it's the non-custodial parent's responsibility to pay back state benefits? What limits or parameters should there be on retroactive child support? What can we do to make the system less corrupt? Have you had an experience with this? Let us discuss the madness down below. Men don't even know their doctors' names. How can we expect them to handle 50-50 custody? Is a question that I get a lot in my comments. In fact, it's a whole trope, it's a whole stereotype. Men are just not known as being the primary caretakers when it comes to doctors and appointments. But can we examine why that is? Is it possible that it's not just because dads are lazy and don't care? Is it possible that there are other maybe societal factors at play? And every once in a while, could it be true that some parents withhold medical information on purpose? Without making any excuses for men who really are deadbeats, let's rewind back to how these two became parents in the first place. How did the dad find out? Simple question, how did he find out? Because from day one, her body is doing all the talking. From day one, he is completely reliant on her to communicate to him what is going on medically. He has no right, nor should he, to test her for pregnancy. Do you think he's going to pick out the OBGYN for her? No. Her body, her choice. We all know that. So we as women pick our doctors, and you know how HIPAA works. He once again becomes reliant on us for that information. Dad has no right to be involved at this point. He can't just call up the doctor and ask to see the ultrasound. He relies on mom. If the dad wants to know the child's gender, but mom doesn't want him to, he's not going to know the child's gender. He will not be given this information. Fast forward, here's the baby, and here's the bill. Whose name is on the bill? Serious question, whose name is on that medical bill? Because I was married, and when I gave birth, all the bills went right to me. When the state sends out communications to check on how the baby is doing cognitively and physically, they have been contacting me, not him. I sat him down and I was like, let me look at your emails. Are you getting this stuff too? And no, not at all. They don't give a shit about him. Even at my kid's school, they default to me for communication, and he has 2 kids enrolled in there. I only have 1. Is it always that dads are lazy and don't care, or are there many factors at play here? And I will be the first to admit that it is so easy to take other people's labor for granted if it's not always in your face. I think we've all experienced a chore just silently becoming your chore because you just do it. And that's what these societal systems do to moms and dads. How can we change our systems to make fathers more included? And how can we when some mothers feel that a father's inclusion is too much inclusion? Like, what is the right balance between giving fathers enough medical information to be properly involved and giving mothers the privacy that they want? How much responsibility do we as mothers have to communicate that information? Can we recognize that it may be a privilege to be granted this information so early? Personally, I believe that either parent who takes the child to an appointment should be including the other parent, letting them know any updates, keeping them abreast of all changes, not letting them find out that their child has ADHD through a parent-teacher conference instead of through you who lives half a mile away. Yes, that happened. But for dads, if you haven't already, make a medical folder. Hound for that information, get as much as you can. Some men are lazy, but being progressive, what can we as society do to give children two equal parents who are both involved? Leave your ideas down below.